Hi, and welcome to Trex Academy, where you can learn everything you need to know about building your deck project. I'm Devin, and I'm here with Lindsay, and in this video, you'll learn how to install Trex Enhanced decking.
Now we've just finished installing our Trex Protect joist tape. That's going to extend the life of our deck by sealing around those deck fasteners. And what that does is help prevent moisture from seeping into those areas.
Yeah, exactly. And so far, we've installed our joist tape on half of this frame, stopping at that breaker board. I like to break it up, especially when I have something like a breaker board. It just seems like a natural stopping point, right? So we have our tape down there, and then we're going to move on to installing our deck boards, and then just repeat that process past the breaker board on the other half of the frame. So with that out of the way, I think we're ready to set up some sawhorses and our material so we can just work right here in front of the frame.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go grab those materials. Okay, for our deck, we're going to be aligning our deck boards flush with the front of our frame, and we're going to be doing that on all three sides. So we've chosen this option because we're going to conceal the ends of our decking with Trex fascia. Since the fascia is going to be held off the rim joist by spacers, that's just going to allow for water and debris to exit behind the fascia. So we'll want to make sure that all of the ends of those deck boards are cut square and that they're flush with the outside of the side rim joist.
An easy way for the DIYer to flush these ends is to install a stop. Now for this, we used a 2x6 because that's what we had lying around, but you could also use a 2x4 or something wider. We'll just fasten the stops temporarily to the outside of our side rim joists with some 3-inch wood screws about every 2 to 3 feet, just enough to keep them tight to the rim joist. Hold the top of the stop up past the top of the rim joist, the thickness of the deck board, which is 1 inch in our case.
Okay, so now we're ready to install our first deck board. We're going to be starting at our front rim joist and working towards the house.
Okay.
And because of that, we're going to have to notch out for our post for this first deck board.
Yeah.
Okay, it's also important to note, in another video, I calculated and framed in a way so that I'd be using full deck boards from the beginning, and more importantly, I would end with a full deck board against the house instead of having a partial rip board.
Well, hopefully everything goes to plan.
Yeah, I think it will. All right, so also I have this grooved edge board here. It's going to be coming up again flush with this, and then we'll have that Trex board, or that Trex fascia, that's going to cover up that grooved edge board.
Okay, now could we put that Trex fascia just slightly under the deck board, kind of like we did with the stairs?
Right, okay, so you're talking about ending up with an overhang,
Yes.
something like that?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, you could, but if you were, I would definitely recommend using a square edge board.
Okay.
And have a much nicer look.
Yeah, I can see where that would look better in this, in that application, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so the first thing we'll do then is square the end of our deck board.
Okay.
They don't come square from the factory.
Sounds good.
Okay, now we're ready to start notching our posts.
I'll get that
get
to
that
you.
tied up against our stop.
Yep.
It's perfect.
That's right.
I'm just going to clamp this in place so we can work hands-free. All right.
Awesome.
There we go, very nice. Okay, so the process of marking for those notches is really simple. We're just going to be using a speed square throughout. So you can see the speed square is great because it's actually transferring the line for the sides of our post out on both sides. So I'm actually going to leave a small gap because I don't have to be tied up against that post. So I'm just going to move in this direction about 1/4 inch.
All right, and will that gap be covered by the post sleeve and the post skirt?
Yeah, exactly. That's why we don't have to be too precise.
Okay.
So we'll just do the same thing on the other side, going 1/4 inch in the other direction. So I should have about a 1/2 inch gap altogether.
Great.
There we go. So we have 2 of our notches, or 2 of the marks for our notches, right? But we still have to get that front mark.
Okay.
To get that, we have to think about our configuration. We know that the front of our deck board is going to be flush with the front of that joist. So we'll just measure back the thickness of that joist material.
Okay. And the thickness of that's about 1.5 inches, right?
1.5 inches, right.
Okay. But we still want to leave that 1/4 inch, yeah?
Yeah, exactly, right.
All right, so 1.25 inches.
1.25 inches,
Okay.
yep. Still using that speed square.
Okay.
You just go 1.25 inches back.
Yep.
And now we've got 2 lines that we can connect with the straight edge of that square.
Cool.
Okay. There we go. So we have 2 of our notches marked out. These are ready to cut. Now we do have 1 more notch to make, but I wanted to show you this one because it's going to be a little bit different.
Okay.
Okay, so as we come down here, most of the process is pretty similar, but obviously you can tell that our deck board ends right here, so we're not going to be able to wrap that all the way around. And the reason is because the width of this deck frame is larger than 20 feet. It's actually at 22.
Right.
So we knew that we were going to need 2 deck boards.
Okay.
But instead of just running the board long and having a random spot for our butt joint, we actually have our railing. So the great thing is now we can actually choose where that split happens. And then just as you mentioned earlier, we can use that post sleeve and that post skirt to conceal that joint.
Okay.
Right?
I like
Pretty
it.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, most of that's the same process. Okay. Just put the square here about a 1/4 inch away from that post. Get that line all the way out there. And then the same thing, make our mark at 1 1/4 inches to get our line at the front.
Okay.
Again, using that square to transfer that line. Now the third line that we make is going to be at the center of our post.
All right.
Okay, I know I'm using a 4x4, so it's actually 3.5 inches thick or wide all the way around. And then half of 3.5 inches is going to be 1 3/4 inches.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll measure 1 3/4 inches away from this cut line here. 1 3/4 inches. There we go. And now I just need to transfer that line down. So there we go. So what you'll end up with is sort of a reverse L. See, I have this small piece here. You can kind of imagine that as we bring in that next board, it's going to be a mirror of that. Actually go around here and have that little L where once we install that post skirt, it's going to pretty well cover it up. So now that we have all the notches marked, it's time to cut them out. Okay, got this first deck board notch. We're going to put it in place. Again, we have to make sure that the end of the deck board is tight against that stop. Looks great. How's your notch down there?
About 1/4 inch, just like we planned.
All right, perfect. Looking good here as well. So the next thing that we'll do then is make sure that the front of our deck board is going to be flush with the front of our rim joist. So we'll grab our clamps for that, because these can actually do 2 things at once. So obviously they can hold it in place. If we put our front rim joist and the front of our deck board right in line and tight against that, that'll actually help us hold that flush. There we go.
Yeah. So I can see how important this might be to keep everything flush, because the boards that come behind it will mimic this one. So they
Right. So we need this to be as straight as possible, right? Because every board after it is going to mimic anything that this board does. Okay. Looking good. All right, so with this clamped in place, now we're ready to fasten it permanently. So to do that, we're going to be using these Trex approved color match composite deck screws. These are going to be only attached to the front of our deck board, and then we'll be switching to another fastener that we're going to use throughout until we get to our last deck board by the house. When we're using these, it's important to note that we need to be 1 inch away from the edge and then also 1 inch in from our end. But clearly this part past the post is going to be pretty hard to fasten into because we really don't have much material. So when you come across something like this, it's really important to pre-drill first. But just as a best practice, I always like to pre-drill when I'm using these surface mount screws. So what I'm going to do, I'll take my speed square again, and then I'm going to bring my drill in with the right size bit, and then I'm just going to have it right at that inch mark every time that I see a joist. So at least every 16 inches, I'll do the same thing, move down here, and then pre-drill right there. So Lindsay, if you don't mind, after I pre-drill, I'll just have you follow behind me and then start putting in all the fasteners.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started on this corner. So now we have the front edge of our deck board secured, but we still need to secure that inside edge. And to do that, we're going to be using that other fastener type that I was talking about. That's going to be our Trex Hideaway hidden fasteners. So these are available in both box and bucket quantities, and they're made of a glass-filled nylon with a stainless steel screw that's already preset, which just makes installation really easy. Okay, so there's a couple different ways to install these, and one of those is going to be just have a scrap piece of the material that you're working with. In this case, we have our Trex enhanced deck boards. So I just cut a scrap to the width of our joist material, which is 1.5 inches. So now I can just bring this in, really push that tight. That's going to hold that vertically while I can fasten that in. It also makes sure that it's held tight to the next deck board. But when I'm doing this, I can't actually fasten that all the way down. Otherwise, I can't bring in that next deck board because it's going to be too tight. So what I would do instead, fasten it about just underneath the height of the deck board, and then bring in that deck board. Then I can finally secure it all the way down. We've also got another way that I think is a little bit easier.
Yeah, we have the Hideaway hidden fastener tool. So really all you have to do is snap the hidden fastener right into the tool like so, and then just push it tight right up against the deck board. This fastener comes with a drill bit that I've already put in my drill, and once it's pushed tight, you just stick it in there like so, and it drills it right down. You can go all the way down with it.
Yeah, it's
and
perfect.
then pull it right out.
Again, same function. It's holding it vertically, and just like you said, it's going to be held tight against that next deck board, but you don't have to only go halfway down.
Right.
So let's go ahead and start installing all of these Hideaway hidden fasteners. Then we can bring in that next deck board.
Great.
Ready to bring in that next deck board. Again, always making sure that they're tight to our stop down here. Just gonna tap this in using a rubber mallet. There we go. Okay, looking good down here. So I typically like to work on one end at a time. I'm gonna start right here using those same Hideaway hidden fasteners, and I'll just continue this process one deck board after another all the way to the house. So once I have this secured, I'll just be repeating this whole process on the other side of our breaker board. So let's go ahead and get those installed. We'll just keep on doing this all the way down.
All right.
We are almost there. Just 2 more deck boards left in this section. All right.
So close.
Okay, we'll just slide it into position.
Yeah, got it.
We have our notch cut for our post. Perfect. From here, I just need to make sure that the end of that deck board is going to be right in line with the deck board next to it. Looks great.
Cool.
So we also left all of our fasteners a little bit loose so that when we brought this deck board in, we knew that it would fit in there easily and not take a lot of effort to get it tight against that clip. From here, we're just going to continue installing those Hideaway fasteners. I'm going to start on this side, and I'll get as far as I can go, and then I'll just have you continue the rest of the way down.
All right, sounds good to me.
All right, let's get to it.
Okay.
All right, here we go. It's the last deck board we have to install.
Yes, so exciting.
Yeah, almost there.
Yep.
Okay, we have to come in at a bit of a diagonal.
Yep.
There we go. Just need to double check that this is straight on the end. There we go. All right, looking really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously it's gonna be really difficult to get our hands behind here or a rubber mallet to make sure that this is gonna be tight against those Hideaway hidden fasteners.
Right.
So instead, we're just gonna bring in our pry bar, lay it flat, and then we'll just put some torque on that. And that'll make sure that that's tight up against the fastener. That'll be perfect. But if you already have your siding installed, another way to do that could be to bring in some blocking, maybe a scrap piece of wood. Just bring it in like that, and then you can see if my hand was that scrap, that would protect that siding from damage.
Good to know. Yeah, this is a really great fit. All of that pre-planning that we did really paid off.
It really worked out, didn't it?
Now, what would have happened, I have to ask, if we messed up our pre-planning somehow or got a calculation wrong or just skipped it all together?
Didn't even do it, huh?
Yeah, and ended up not being able to fit a full deck board here on the end. What if we needed a smaller width board?
So, no, it's not actually important to have a full width deck board here.
Okay.
I think it's just more satisfying overall, and it is a really good look to have that full deck board.
Yeah.
If you had a smaller space, like maybe we had 3 inches or 2 inches left over, we would just rip that width of deck board down. And again, making sure we have a 1/4 inch space on both sides.
Okay.
We would just put that in using those surface mount fasteners.
Yeah.
So we've got this in position. Again, we have those Hideaway hidden fasteners. That's going to secure the back end of it. And then we'll be using those surface mount fasteners again for the back side here, side against the wall, okay? So essentially, this is just the same process we did on the front of our deck, but reverse. Because if you remember, for the front of that deck board, we secured that using the same fastener.
Yes.
And now we're doing that for the back end. Okay, again, I always like to pre-drill when I'm using this, just a best practice kind of thing. I'm gonna start down here, work my way to the right, and as I'm doing it, I have to keep in mind that I need to stay away from that ledger flashing, which is about 1.5 inches thick. So I'll come out about 2.25 inches, something like that.
Yeah, so what would happen then if we just had that 2-inch width deck board?
Right, so as far as fastening it.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, you are gonna have to attach that ledger flashing. Okay. But what I would recommend is just use some Trex Protect tape. It's the same width as that ledger flashing. So it would just go down all the way across. And then as you're attaching that board and those fasteners go through the ledger board, that membrane is gonna seal around the fastener just to make sure that water can't get in it.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right, so from here I'll start pre-drilling from this side, and then I'll give it to you about halfway down, again working from one side to the other.
Cool.
Okay?
Sounds good.
All right, so we've snapped both of the lines that we need to cut the space for that breaker board to fit in.
Yes.
This is the last thing that we need to do, and we will be completely finished with decking.
Very exciting.
Pretty exciting, right? Okay, so just keep in mind though that that breaker board is just a standard decking board, okay? It could be either a grooved edge board or a square edge. Either one will be fine, because the edges of that board are going to be hidden by the edge of our boards that intersect it. Additionally, we're going to be using those surface mount fasteners, so we don't have to worry about trying to use hidden fasteners in that space.
Cool.
Some other things to think about. It is 5.5 inches wide, so we just have to plan for that space and also think about the gap that we need to have on both sides of that breaker board.
So why do we need a gap there? Does it have to be a specific size?
Right, so I'll speak to the why first.
Okay.
As it rains or as humidity changes, that wood frame is going to swell or shrink. Okay, so we have to make sure we have room to accommodate the movement of that happening.
Okay.
But also temperature is going to affect both our deck boards and our frame, and they're going to move at a different rate. So again, that gap just allows for that expansion and contraction.
Okay.
So it just gives it extra room. Okay, so with that out of the way, I think we're almost ready to start cutting. You can see that we've cut our first deck board here and our last deck board. We've already cut all of these to length because if you bring the saw over, we drop that in place. Now you can see that we can actually continue from this and go all the way to the end. So this also acted as our line for that chalk line that we had. We just pulled this flush to the end here, lined it up with the end. We're able to snap that for that straight line across. Obviously, you could have just taken this one deck board at a time, squared your ends, measured it, made a line, cut it on that, right? Even me saying it just seems like a long process.
This seems way more efficient.
I really think it is. Just installing them all, cutting it all at once, save you a lot of time.
Yep.
Okay, so also we've set the depth of our blade to just at the bottom of those deck boards. Again, we want to make sure that we're not cutting into all that tape or our joist. So that looks good there. And yeah, I think you're ready to go.
All right, let's do this. We just finished installing our breaker board, which completes the installation of our Trex Enhanced decking. What's next?
Yeah, so from here we're going to be installing our Trex fascia around the perimeter of our deck. And if you'd like to see a video of that installation and a whole lot more covering the entire deck building process, you can go to trex.com/academy. Thanks for watching.